All right, so today we get to move on and we're going to look very closely at how to draw the human head. And we're going to start out again with the structure, and the structure for the head, of course, is the skull. So we're going to draw the skull in these 3 positions here, and I'm going to break it down for you pretty simply. So when we're drawing a head or a skull, we're pretty much always going to start with a circle. And you might think that's strange because obviously, a face isn't circular, right? It's not like, this happy face here. Can you see that? But we can always start out with a good old-fashioned circle. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to divide the circle in half. Now this actually becomes where the eyebrows are, not the eyes. The eyes are a little bit below, but this is where the eyebrows are. And then if we come down just to the very bottom of that circle and make another mark, we see there's a distance from here to here. And what we basically want to do for the average head is that we want to have this distance right here come down about here. So we'll just estimate, and then we're going to put another line. This is the bottom of the chin, okay? Now, again, our head isn't perfectly circular, and if we're looking at it from the front view, it's actually not even this circular. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of just cut off the ends about that, like that, okay? And then the jaw, if we're looking at our skulls again, is going to come up about like this, and it's going to meet at the base of the circle. So now we kind of have this basic outline for our skull, and I hope that you can start to see it. Still have this happy face here because I like it. Now let's go ahead and put in the features for this skull, okay? So the first thing that I think is easiest to measure is going to be the eye sockets. Now remember I said that this is where the eyebrow is and the eyes are going to be below it, okay? So the eyes are going to be about like this, but we have to remember that the eye socket in the skull is going to be much bigger than this. So the eye socket actually does come up all the way to the brow ridge, and the eye is going to fit right in that socket. So I'll probably darken this just to make the sockets a little bit more visible for you. So now we have the eye sockets. Let's go ahead and before we do the nose, let's actually put in where the upper jaw meets with the lower jaw. So you see we have this line up here for the brow, and then this is going to be the bottom of the nose. And so we have this much space left, and it's basically, on most people, we're going to just divide this in half. This is going to be where the mouth is. So the upper teeth are up here, and then the bottom teeth are below. And we're going to keep this, though, very simple. So we're just going to make this a little bit wider, bring it up. All right, and this is the top part of the skull right here, and then we have the bottom jaw and where it meets. And then we can, if we want to, just add a little bit more detail. There's kind of a gap right here. Sorry, I don't know all the anatomical terms for the skull, but you get the point. And then the teeth, and then the lower teeth down here. So this is kind of a basic average skull. Go ahead and we'll just put in the I guess nasal cavity. So the bottom of the nose is going to be about here. I'm not worried about getting the exact shape right of all these features, but I basically just want you to practice drawing skulls, okay? And something that can be fun is once you are familiar with the basic average skull, start having a little bit of fun with it and just, sketching some not so average looking skulls. So maybe we have a skull where the face is going to be very short instead of your average length. So instead of having a length here that's equal, let's just make it extra short and see how that impacts the look of this skull. So everything else is going to be the same. We're going to kind of flatten the sides here. Let's go ahead and just kind of scribble in the eye sockets. Sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. And then basically we have kind of a more of a cartoonish face, I would say, here, because we have a lot of shortening here. Or, you know what, we could, instead of starting with a circle, we could start with a long oval like this and kind of make a cartoon character almost. Let's give them just a really long face. But just have fun with this. Just kind of explore, you know, what you can do. And if you're interested in making like cartoons or, you know, playing with features or doing caricatures at some point, this is just a really fun thing to play around with. All right, but let's move on. So let's do, actually, before we do this 3/4 view, let's go ahead and do the side view over here because it's a little bit more simple. So we're gonna, again, start out with just a circle. Doesn't have to be a perfect circle. You know, we all kind of have lumpy heads. And then for the side of the face, what you're gonna notice, I think, first is that actually the front of your face, if you aren't considering the nose, which a skull doesn't really have a nose that protrudes anyway, so it's a little easier to see on a skull, but our face is pretty flat. So let's go ahead and find the center of this circle, bottom of the circle, and then actually I made the face come down a little bit too far. It should actually just come down about to here. All right, so we have kind of a flat face, and then we need to find on the side view this center line as well, because this is where the jaw is going to come up and attach to the top of the head. So the jaw comes up at a little bit of an angle, and then it's going to attach here. And then this is actually where the ear is. So it's very easy to really simplify how to draw the head in a profile view if you just understand this underlying structure a little bit. So then remember, here is the eyebrows, the brow line. So the eye socket is going to be about right here. And then this is where the bottom of the nose is. And then this is where the mouth is. Now there's a couple of interesting things to consider on the side view of the head. Okay, first of all, if you'll notice on my reference down at the bottom, the mouth or the muzzle actually protrudes a little bit. It's not perfectly flat. All right. And then for the nasal cavity on the skull, it kind of ends right here. So it only protrudes just a little bit. But on a person, you can see how the nose comes down here and there would be cartilage supporting the rest of the nose, which isn't considered part of the skeleton. So the nose kind of protrudes that way. And so this can make it very easy for you to draw the head in a profile view, because I think a lot of times when we try to just do the, you know, the contour, it's easy to kind of like make it too curvy and things aren't really lining up. So if you actually start with this flat edge right here for the face and just work on it from there, it makes it much easier to draw the profile of a person. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this 3/4 view as well. And on the reference that I have here, the skull is actually kind of looking upwards, but I'm not really gonna, well, I'll draw it both ways just so that you can see the difference. So let's first, I'm gonna draw it so that it's not really looking upwards. So we're gonna again start with our basic circle. Now this time we are going to, because we're looking at it from a 3/4 view instead of straight on or straight from the side, we actually need to think about this circle not as a circle but as a sphere. So instead of drawing the center line straight across like this, I'm going to curve it around just like it's wrapping around a sphere. So that's going to help place our eyes much easier, okay? And then again, I probably made that just a little too high. And then down at the bottom of the sphere, we have where the bottom of the nose is going to be. And then let's find, so that we have this distance, we need approximately that distance to get down to the bottom of the head. We're not gonna, I'll just put in kind of a general line here, because what we need to actually find next is the center line of the head. So you can see that this head is off at an angle, kind of maybe looking in some other direction. So it can be a little bit tricky to find the center line. You know, right here, obviously it's straight down the middle. The center line here, we don't even see because we're looking at the face in profile. But when we're looking at a face that is just angled a little bit differently, usually we call this 3/4 view, even if it's not exactly 3/4. But what we want to do is kind of find like where this line is going to be. And we're going to bring this line all the way down to the bottom of the chin here. And it's going to curve around the top of the head. It's going to flatten a little bit for the face, not too much. It's still going to protrude out a little bit. All right, but this is where our center line is going to be. And now we have the bottom of the jaw right here, so we can go ahead and draw that in. Oh, and we need to find, again, right here, since we're going to see a little bit of the ear, we have to find this line, but it's not just going to be straight in the middle anymore. It's going to be a little bit behind. So it's going to be approximately right here. And then for the jaw, then we can attach it. And then we still have the back of the head in view just a little bit. So remember, this is the center line of the face. So we can put in the eye sockets here. And we see this one that we have a lot of foreshortening on the side of the face that's further away from us. And then the nose is going to end up being about right here. Remember, this I'm not actually following along with the photo. I'm trying to draw it more straight on instead of looking upwards, and we'll look upwards next. And then we can see a little bit of the skull over here. And then the mouth will be about right here. And then this is where it's attaching. And there's a lot of shadow on the photo reference that I have. I had a hard time finding really like just straight on photo references of skulls. These are all very kind of like stylized photographs that I got on pixabay.com. I'm sure that there's probably some scientific resources out there that I could have looked for to find just some more, you know, not so stylized versions of the skull. So let's now go ahead and draw the skull just as we see it in the picture. So still just going to start off with a circle here, and then I'm going to find, this time instead of the line curving that way, since this skull is looking upwards, and this is something that it takes a little practice to start thinking about, but if we're looking upwards, then this is going to wrap around kind of like that. Instead, it's kind of the opposite. So this one is almost maybe looking, we're kind of seeing it looking downward a little bit like this. And this one we're going to be looking upward. All right, so we have this center line and then this center line, or not center line, but this is the other line. And then we're going to find, we're going to just estimate this distance down to the bottom of the jaw and just kind of give a general line there. And then let's find the center line of the face. It's going to be about right here. So we'll bring that down. We'll draw in our jaw very loosely. Oh, and now you see how this is kind of back here. It's going to be approximately the same here. So we're going to just put it here. This is where the jaw should attach. All right, and then this is the brow ridge, so we can go ahead and put in the eye socket here. This eye socket will be a little bit more foreshortened. You can see now a little bit more clearly in the photo what's going on here. You can see in the photo that we see much less of this eye socket because it's foreshortened. And then also the nasal cavity is going to appear a little bit higher up just because of the angle that we're looking. And then let's go ahead. So we have this area is for the mouth. So we're going to find about the center of that. And I'm not going to draw the mouth open. We're just going to keep it very basic here. So this is where it's going to attach. And then once you kind of have this basic structure and you can actually go in and draw some of the angles, you know, some of these ridges that you see in the reference, but we don't need to worry about that right now. All we really need to do is kind of just understand the basic structure of the head, and that's going to get us a very long ways. And we're going to be able to draw both, you know, more realistic portraits, and also if you're interested again in, you know, doing cartoons, just understanding this underlying structure is going to help you play with this structure and emphasize certain features or exaggerate certain features in order to make a more cartoonish looking face. So now let's try to apply that structure to this guy's face right here. So we're going to start out very basic with our circle here. And he's pretty much looking straight at us. There's a little bit of an angle to how he's looking at us, but for now we're just going to kind of treat this like he's looking straight at us until we find that center line, and then we'll, you know, kind of adjust that a little bit. Find this, the bottom of the sphere. Okay, so we have this distance down to here. And remember, we have to account for the fact that the side of the head does get a little bit cut off. So that's why it might look a little bit too wide at first. So you have to remember to flatten the sides of the head. I sometimes forget that. All right, so here's the bottom of the jaw, and let's go ahead and put in the center line. Let's try to draw him as accurately as possible. So the center line isn't going to be straight down the middle. I'd say that it's just a little bit off, like right there, okay? So we're going to give it a little bit of a curve at the top especially. And then it's going to come down to about right there. And then let's go ahead and draw the rest of his jaw in. He has kind of a, you know, the big difference between a male face and a female face is the jaw. So males tend to have a wider jaw down here at the bottom. And then we're just going to attach it to the skull. And even though we're going to draw him as more of a portrait, let's go ahead and just lightly indicate where the whole eye socket is going to be. So it doesn't have to be super dark because we are going to place the eyes, but it is helpful to see how when we're drawing a portrait, we still need to know where these underlying structures are. Okay. And then we can go ahead and just, his neck just kind of comes straight down. One thing that can be tricky about drawing the head is a lot of times we draw the neck too small, like that. But it's pretty wide. It's only a little bit more narrow than the actual face. Okay, so now we have these basic structures here. We kind of know that his mouth is going to fall right here. He kind of looks like a robot right now. Let's go ahead, though, and figure out where some of his features should fit. Let's start out with the eyebrows, because we know that the eyebrows are going to be about right here. So I'm just going to kind of scribble these in very lightly. His eyebrows are kind of straight across. And then the bottom of his nose should be about right here. Looks funny because his eye sockets are so big right now, but once we actually draw in his eyes, this won't seem quite as weird. So I'm not going to draw his nose into detail. I'm just going to kind of indicate where that is. And then now let's look at where his eyes should be. And let's start out with just the circles for his actual eyeballs. And then we'll draw some eyelids to really define the shape. So I'm going to switch over to my tripod grip here. And we're just going to very generally put his eyelids around. So now you can see that drawing in the eyeballs very lightly is just a good way to guide you. And it helps you so that, you know, if you've tried to draw faces before and found that you have like one eye a little bit down here, one eye a little bit too high, and you can't even figure out which one is right, which one is wrong, start out with just the basic circles. It's easier for you to estimate where those belong. And then you can draw the eyelids, and that's going to help. You can also, even before you draw the eyes, you can draw another line just approximately where they are, just to make sure that they line up with each other. Okay, so now we've got the eyes. Let's just kind of indicate some pupils. That's just kind of makes it seem a little bit more realistic when you add in the pupils. We'll just darken those. Again, we're just going to keep this very general. But this kind of shows you how to start understanding the face so that you can, if you want to make a more realistic face, this is going to be how you get started with it. And then, you know, everyone is a little bit different from each other. Not everyone fits the exact same mold. So you're just going to learn to observe the characteristics of whoever you want to draw, and you're just going to draw in those differences. You know, they might have a longer face or a wider face, or their nose might be shorter or longer. You know, little things like that make a big difference when it comes to drawing people. So let's go ahead and put in his mouth. I'm going to just put in a little bit more shading to indicate the shape and form of his nose. And it doesn't take much, you know, I'm basically just scribbling here, and you can get a lot done with scribbles. And this is kind of, for me, this is really the extent of my drawing when I draw, because I'm really more of a painter, but it's good to at least have a basic understanding of all these things. It helps you with everything. So get good at drawing, and everything else comes so much easier. And it doesn't, like I said, doesn't have to be like a big, finished, perfect drawing. Just understand the structures and the form, and it gets you a long way. So the mouth I think tends to come down, like if you drew a line from the pupil down, the mouth basically, it's a lot wider than we typically think of it. I think sometimes when we draw the mouth, we draw it a lot narrower than it actually is. And then once we have the line for the mouth, we can just kind of add in, you know, the upper lip, the lower lip. And this is where there's going to be a lot of variation between people as well. Just the shape of some of these features. And then I can see that I need to refine his jaw just a little bit. And then if we look at his ear, the top of the ear kind of meets up with his eye. And then the bottom of the ear matches up with his nose. So that can be another tricky thing to, you know, place if you don't understand the structure and how everything on the face relates to everything else on the face. All right, so let's go ahead and draw in the hairline as well, because he's really not recognizable at all without it. So the hairline, since this is a guy, his hair won't have as much volume as a lot of other people who have, you know, longer hair. They're going to have more volume around their head. So it's important to remember that the hair isn't going to be like right where the skull is, okay? Because the hair is on top of the skull, so we're going to add a little bit of volume. And actually, the way that he has his hair done, it feels like he really has a lot of volume up here. So I might be over-exaggerating this maybe a little bit, but we'll just see. All right, and then let's kind of find where the hairline is going to be. And this is something that you can just kind of play with until it looks right. And he has a little bit of a peak right here that I'll draw in. It's important to think about hair not as like the style and not as like every strand that you can see, but more as like just a shape. And I think I did bring this up way too. I probably exaggerated that a little too much. So we're just going to kind of find the general shape of his hair instead of worrying about every single strand of hair on his face. And then I'm just going to make this a little bit more clear and just kind of darken it. All right, so you can see that we've got a pretty strong start. It's not perfect. It doesn't look exactly like him, of course, but this would be where I would start. And then what I would do is, you know, trace this onto a clean sheet of paper so I don't have all these construction lines distracting me, and I would make some more refinements from there. So a lot of times doing a portrait is something that you'll do in phases, just so that, you know, you can have all the construction lines. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of erasing really in any circumstance. So I'm going to leave all those construction lines there and just start with a new sheet of paper if I want to take this portrait a little bit further. So now we have got one kind of standard looking dude. Let's also apply this to the face of a female. So there's just going to be some very subtle differences with the female face, but we're going to start, as always, with just a circle here. And then for this girl, we really have a nice straight on look here. So we're going to go ahead and just find the center line. We're going to keep it very simple. And then this is where the bottom of the nose will be. And so we have this distance. Let's estimate it's going to come down about right here. And remember to kind of flatten the sides of the head. And let's go ahead. We might have to adjust the shape of her jaw, but we're going to just go ahead and roughly put in where it should be. All right, so now we have a basic shape for the head that we can work from. Doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, in drawing, you never ever have to start with perfection, but the more you draw, the more these things, these proportions, the structure, the form, everything just becomes a little bit more natural to you the more time you actually spend drawing. So here's the center line of the face. Let's go ahead and do the, very lightly, we're going to put in the eye sockets. Then we'll lightly also put in the nose and then the mouth. So we're really going to start with just a basic skull shape here. Let's go ahead and just kind of indicate her neck. Remember, the neck is just almost as wide as the head itself, even on a female. Okay, so now that we have this, let's go ahead and let's kind of look at her eyebrow. A lot of times the eyebrow shape is going to really just wrap around the eye socket itself. And for her, we'll just keep this very, again, very general. We're not going to go in and try to draw every detail. And then for the eyeballs, we'll just start with circle. Looks a little funny at first, but it really helps. And again, if you want to just draw a line through here to make sure that everything matches up, that's totally fine as well. And then we'll define, I feel like I'm making these eyes way too wide apart. I think that I actually placed the sockets a little too wide. So let's just move this over a little bit. Again, no need to erase when we're just sketching and we're just trying to figure it out. And then we'll put the pupils in because I think that helps it to feel a little bit more human, less robotic. Okay, and then her nose comes down. Her nose is actually a little bit shorter than the standard human face, and she is pretty young, and that's typical when you're drawing a younger person. Some of the features are going to get shortened, and they're going to be kind of like smooshed all together a little bit more. And maybe actually we should draw the face of a child just so you can see the difference between a child's face and the average adult face. So with her nose, we can kind of see her two nostrils. We don't see a lot. Maybe there's a little bit of shadow like over here. But now let's just go ahead and put in her mouth. And you can see that even though we still have all these construction lines, it just starts feeling very much more human when we start adding in the features. Yeah, this eye's a little too big, but you know, you get the point. So let's draw. Her mouth needs to be a little bit wider. And then we can go ahead and add the lips, which gives a lot of character to the face. And I think that I need to soften up her jaw. I made it a little bit too angular. So we can just kind of go in and adjust that, make it a little bit more round and not so wide down here at the bottom. So we can kind of trim that off a little bit. And then she'll look a lot better too once we get her hair in place. Makes a big difference. And we can kind of see too her ear just poking through a little bit, so we know that the bottom is going to be right at the base of the nose, especially if we're looking at someone straight on. We don't see the other ear, so we're not going to worry about that. And then the top of the ear would be about with her eye. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw in the shape of her hair. So She has her hair a little bit behind this ear on this side. And if you're unsure of the shape of the hair, just go in with like some kind of more straight lines. And then you can always adjust and add, you know, more curves if you need to later. And then this side actually comes down almost like in front of this eye a little bit. And then it wraps around the bottom of her jaw. And it's actually, seems funny to draw it like this. It's really obvious that it looks a little bit, her hair looks a little shorter on this side and it's longer on this side. So I had to double check the picture to make sure that that's really what is going on. And it is. And then her hair kind of wraps around little ways. She has lighter hair than he does, but we're still going to color it dark just so it shows a little bit better. So we have more contrast between the hair and the face. And that kind of just makes the portrait feel a little bit more finished, even though it's still in a very sketchy phase right here. Okay, so let's see if I can find a child's face to draw. Okay, so here's this little guy. He's definitely not looking straight at us. He's kind of running. I'm imagining that he's like kicking a soccer ball or something. But let's just kind of look at his face and just kind of estimate what his proportions should be. So I'm going to start out just like anything else with just this circle. And I'm going to find the center line. He's kind of looking down a little bit, so kind of put the center line right here. And since he's looking down, we're not going to really see this bottom part of the circle, maybe just a little bit. All right, so what we need to notice here is that this distance does not necessarily have to be the same down here because his face needs to be just a little bit shorter because he's younger. So let's go ahead and find the side of the head right here, and remember that it gets a little flatter there. And then over on this side, we're going to do the opposite and just kind of flatten it like that, okay? So we're going to make this line just a little bit shorter than between here. So these are going to be a little bit shorter. Place in the jaw, comes up about right there. Eye sockets right here. So with a kid's face, everything up here is going to be about the same. It's actually the lower jaw. When we add that, it's just going to be a little bit shorter than it is on most adult faces. So the bottom of the nose comes to about right here. And then the mouth, you see that we have all these features feel like very smushed and very close together. That's why when we look at a little tiny baby that's just been born, they look like they have a smushed face because they kind of really do. As we get older, our face gets longer. And when we're younger, our face is a little bit shorter. So that's important to know that, you know, if you want to draw a kid, you're just going to make their features a little bit closer together. Let's go ahead and draw in his eyebrows. And his eyes are looking down, so we don't see them wide open. So that actually makes it just a little bit easier, I think, to draw. So we're going to angle his eyelids downwards just a little bit. And we're not going to go into detail on the eyes or anything like that. And then I made his nose a little bit too dark here, but you know, I hope that you can see kind of what's going on here with a child's face, just even if we keep it pretty simple. Let's go ahead and fix his jaw here because I made it a little too angular again. We'll soften it up, make it a little bit more round. And kids really do kind of have a skinny neck compared to their face, but what we do want to notice is that sometimes, depending on the angle of the portrait that you're drawing, you may not see a lot of the neck. Like on these two, we could kind of see quite a bit of the neck, but since he's looking downwards and he's got his chin tucked into his neck, we don't see as much of his neck. So if I drew the collar of his shirt, it would be about like that. And then let's go ahead and put in his hair just to make him feel a little bit more recognizable. And again, even though his hair is short, it's going to add a little bit of volume on top of his skull. All right, so that is kind of how we would draw a kid's face, or how we would modify the proportions of the face to really fit the actual person that we're looking at, instead of just going off of like a standard model of how we draw the face. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we can draw the head and bring it to more of a finish. Let's just take a look at what we have here as far as the sketch goes. So this was very, very rough, and so I'm kind of just comparing this to the photo to see where I've made some errors, because of course I did. I think, you know, first of all, the hair line I brought up too high, so I need to make sure that is a little bit lower. And I'm going to do more of a full-sized portrait for this demo, and so I need to kind of bring it down on this side too. And you can see that just this really small adjustment makes a really big difference, okay? And everything, as far as, you know, when we're doing a face, because we're so sensitive to the human face, we see every little detail, and that's why drawing portraits can feel so intimidating. But you know, it's really just a matter of practice, and the more that you practice, the more sensitive you're going to get as you draw, and the more accurate you're going to get along the way. So it's just important to not get frustrated when you have little mistakes. Learn from them, make the corrections. Don't, you know, spend all your time erasing. You know, learn from those things and make the corrections, and then move on. And that is exactly what we're going to do now. So instead of nitpicking at this drawing, we're just going to move on and start anew. And I think that I will kind of orient it like this. This is going to make everything a little bit easier to see. And we're just going to start all over. So I'm going to start out. I know this is very, very light. You may not be able to see it on camera. I hope that you can a little bit. And usually when I'm drawing and the proportions are really important, I actually like to draw on my easel instead of on this, because it's kind of angled away from me, and so it actually makes it more difficult to judge my proportions, because I'm looking at it from an angle instead of straight on like this, which is kind of how I'm sitting. So I might need to just pull it up like this just so I can actually check my proportions, make sure that they're accurate. So I can already see that I made the circle a little bit too wide. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and find both center lines. So this is where the eyebrows are going to be, and then this is the center line that goes down the face vertically. And then we're going to go ahead and flatten the ends here. And then we have roughly the same thing going on right here. Okay, so now we have this distance and this distance, and so we just kind of want to estimate. So right about here is where the bottom of the chin should be. So this is going to be the bottom of the nose. This is the eyebrows right here, bottom of the nose, bottom of the chin, and then for the mouth area, so the mouth, so the chin actually will be about like this. The mouth will be about right here. Okay, and now we're just going to roughly draw in the jaw, knowing that we'll probably need to make some adjustments at some point, but this is a good starting place. Okay, so now we kind of have the basic shape of the whole head. And I'm going to also very lightly put in the eye sockets. I won't darken them this time, but we do just kind of want to start thinking about where all the features are going to fit. Okay, and then the nose very lightly. And then the mouth, you can kind of see, if you can see my markings, I hope that you can kind of see the skull now coming forth. And I want to keep it all very light, of course, because I want to build my features on top here. So let's go ahead and kind of put in the eyebrows. Remember, they're up here. We're just going to wrap them around the eye sockets for now. We can go in a little bit later and kind of refine the shape of the eyebrows as needed. And then let's go ahead and just put in the eyeballs. Hopefully these aren't too big, but again, we'll just adjust as we go along. Okay, and then we have the mouth. She's not really smiling. We can maybe, so we'll remember the mouth should be about as wide as from the center of the eyes on down. All right, and then let's kind of just look at the nose. So I think in my original sketch I put her nostrils too far apart, so we'll just kind of lightly put these in so that if we need to adjust them, we'll be able to. All right, so we're looking a little bit creepy, a little bit robotic here, but let's go ahead and start refining some of the features. So we'll start with the eyes. We'll just kind of lightly put in the eyelids, and we'll be able to, of course, adjust these if we need to. And I like to work on one eye and then move right over to the other eye. It just kind of helps me to work more symmetrically. Let's go ahead and put in the iris. And then the lower lid is going to kind of come up over the iris a little bit on each side. Okay, and now let's go ahead and kind of put in some of the hairline a little bit. So we'll remember to bring that hairline down a little bit more than we did in the sketch. And then her hair, I'm just kind of noticing the shape and direction of the hair, but I'm definitely not going in and drawing every strand. And remember, her hair is going to have a little bit of volume on top of her skull. Maybe this is too much, but this is kind of where I'm estimating it to begin with. But just keep the hair just kind of one big shape. Don't worry about going in with a lot of details, especially right now. And generally when you're starting out with a drawing, it really is it can be a challenge, but it's a really good idea to practice leaving all the details out, because think of it this way. If you are starting a drawing and you just start going in and doing all the details like on the eyes and the hair and everything, then you realize that your proportions are off. Then you've done all that work and it's not quite right. So go ahead and let's just start very, very rough and loose and not worrying about anything like that right now, so that we can feel very free to make adjustments as we go along. And then as I go along too, I'm going to start working a little bit darker. And then, you know, even though I'm not going to really erase anything, at least right now, I don't want these initial marks to be too obvious or distracting as we go along. So you'll kind of see how it transforms. I can already see maybe some lack of symmetry in the eyebrows, but I'm not going to worry about that just yet. We're just going to get all the basics in, and let's go ahead and kind of refine the shape of her jaw a little bit. So her face kind of comes down a little bit straight. And then she has a nice gentle curve. I actually, for her, and we'll see, so I'm not going to make this line too dark, but she actually might have a shorter lower jaw than the standard face. And a lot of times we will see that, you know, because she is a girl and she's young, remember? So with younger people, with females, some of these features are going to be a little bit smaller than they would on an adult male. So let's go ahead, let's kind of look at these eyebrows a little bit and refine these. So there's not They go a little straight and then back. And now let's try to just refine the eye a little bit, both the eyes. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail on, you know, each individual feature here. I just want to get a very general impression for you. And you don't see as much of the white of the eyes as you might imagine in your mind. So keep that in mind, just to draw, you know, what you actually observe and not the image that you have in your mind of what an eye is supposed to look like. And then if you remember too, I always try to emphasize not, you know, drawing lines for all these features, you know, like for the nose or anything like that. So we're just going to start putting in some light shading to kind of create this shadow over here instead of drawing it as a line. And we can darken that a little bit later when I'm feeling a little bit more confident about placement of everything. And then she has more shadow over here that's being cast by her hair. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lightly put that in over that whole area. Okay, so let's work on the mouth just a little bit more. I think that, let me see, just kind of looking at the picture to see about if I have this distance pretty accurate. I feel like I want to bring both her mouth and her chin up a little bit. It's feeling, yeah. And when I look at it like this and I'm not looking at it askew, I can see that her face is just way, way, way too long. So I need to make a lot of adjustments. So that's why I think it's really important. I know not everyone can. And certainly it's hard for me to do my video demonstrations and have everything upright like this. I have to, you know, change tons and tons of things in order to be able to do that. Really, it's better to be able to look at your picture straight on so that you have a way better sense of, you know, it's just a more accurate perspective, basically, to be quite honest with you. So when you're looking at it at an angle like this, you're getting actually a foreshortening effect, and that's going to cause you to draw longer, kind of like I am right here. So learn from my mistakes. Try, if you can, to set up your drawing area so that you can look straight on at your picture. And you're going to have a much, much better time. So definitely, I need to bring her mouth up to probably about here. Need to bring her chin up about the same distance, I think. So we're just going to, again, I'm not going to go and erase right now because I just, you know, I really want you also to see this whole, actually, let's see. Okay, let's just kind of see how this goes. So now her neck also needs to be adjusted. Probably her hair length too, but hair length is not nearly as important as all these other features. So we're just going to kind of shade this, and then I'm going to judge again. And if I have to start all over, that's totally fine. So now I can see that her hair has too much volume at the top and the sides. Getting a little closer. Okay, so let's get back to the mouth. And I'll probably erase this since that's actually pretty dark. If I can find my eraser. Here it is. I don't like to use the eraser on these pencils. It's pretty bad eraser. So go ahead and just get rid of that. Okay, so that's already looking a lot better. The only thing is that there's some kind of asymmetry going on here with the jaw. Okay. And usually the mouth kind of curls up at the end. And if you look really closely, you can actually see just a very subtle shape here in the mouth that kind of goes like this. I might have exaggerated it on her a little bit. But it's a nice shape, and it's better than just having a straight line across. It makes it feel much more natural. Okay, and then I'll just kind of give the lips a little bit of value here so that they don't just look outlined. Okay, so we're coming along. I'm thinking that the hair here needs to be a little bit less squared off. Okay. And we'll get her, the fold of her eyelid a little bit more prominent here. And then she doesn't have like a big highlight on her eyes like a lot of people do, so I'm going to just kind of roughly put in her eyes, her pupils. And it's really important when you're doing a person, you can see that this pupil is off. It's like really apparent to us when the pupils are off even just a little bit. So just pay attention to that. Actually, I think they both need to come down a little bit. It'll be less obvious when I give some value to her pupils. And then actually this hairline, I gave it way too much curvature. And these are just some of the things you're going to become more sensitive to as you go. And I'm definitely not like I would like to get to a point of being very proficient and good at portraits, but you can see it's very challenging because, again, we are just so sensitive to every little detail on the human face that even that our observation of the drawing very much exceeds our drawing abilities, especially to begin with. So again, you're just going to become more sensitive to it as you go along. Don't beat yourself up over not getting an exact likeness when you're starting out. It's really, really tricky. But just as with everything else, you know, practice is the most important thing, making adjustments. Sometimes, you know, I didn't even notice how off my sketch was until I got up and I walked away, and then I came back and saw it and I was like, oh man. So again, be patient with yourself, give yourself, a break, come back to it, and then see what might need to be adjusted. Let's go ahead and just put in some shading in the hair. I'm just kind of paying attention again to the general direction of the hair, but I'm not worried about, drawing every strand. The hair we should treat as basically one large mass. So I'm just paying attention to like the general value, the direction of the hair, and then just roughing it in. And then it's a little darker here just because it's casting a little bit of a shadow. There's a little bit of an occlusion shadow right there. And then there's some hair that wraps around the bottom of the jaw here. It's very dark. And then there's going to be a little bit more variation out here in the value of the hair just because this is kind of where the light is hitting. So I'm just going to ignore all those scribbles up there. You can probably hear my dogs in the background trying to get my attention, but we're almost done here, so they can wait. All right, so let's just add a little bit more value here. Very rough, very sketchy, but we're starting to get more of a likeness. But again, it's really going to be a matter of just developing your ability to observe and judge proportions accurately and making adjustments. Again, walking away sometimes is just going to be very, very important so that you can see it objectively, because when we're working on something and we're just staring at it and trying to figure everything out on the fly, we're going to make errors when we're starting out. Just give a little bit more form to the face with some very light, very general shading. Because that helps to make the face feel just a little bit less flat. And typically too, with especially like female face or a young face, you want to keep everything very, very soft and don't overemphasize some of the features that you see on the face, like lines and things like that, because that actually makes the face feel a little bit older. And so that's especially important with children, but we also tend to do it more so for women because they feel like it's more flattering. With men, sometimes, we want a lot of strong features, very prominent. So it's just that's gonna be part of, your style of drawing too. How do you handle lines and features? You can see, you can't even see where the jaw used to be when it was way, way, way too long. Sometimes you can conceal those things just by continuing to work on your drawing, and sometimes not. Sometimes you will have to erase, like I had to with her mouth, because that was going to be a very light area that I wasn't going to be able to conceal with shading. Okay, so let's call this one done. And I hope that you found this helpful and informative. Bye!